to another Into the West episode. My name is Charles. With me today are Richard and Ian. And here we have another tier list for you guys. Today we will be talking about the Kingdom of Angmar, and we will be tiering all the heroes and all the warriors from this list. Before we get started, we just want to recognize and shout out our patrons. Thank you all for your support. You guys are awesome. If you are interested in more content or other perks that we have, please visit our Patreon page, link in the description. All right, let's dive right into Angmar. So let's dive into the profiles. And to start, the Witch-King of Angmar himself.
So straight to the top.
So we've done an episode covering him a long time ago, back in season 1. He is such a versatile hero. People who played with or against this hero know that you can modify his might, will, and fate, kind of customize it. In the list building process, you can spend however much points you want on him. So he can fit into pretty much armies of all points levels. And he can almost do anything as well. He can be pretty good in combat. You know, he's a pretty good spellcaster. He's also a pretty good support hero.
He's often in the conversation for being one of the best evil heroes. He's very much on the short list there. And I would argue he's even better than the other list that he's available in. So Burdhur and Mordor. I think just because of the options available in Mordor, as good as he is, you see Mordor lists without him. But then in Angmar, you know, it's hard to ally in. And he's just so good in this list, and he gets like extra bonuses, like with the army bonus and stuff. So he's as close to a must take as it gets, I think.
Yeah, I think unless you're doing it at smaller points values, and with more of a niche list, with this army, you might not see him, but for the most part, he's going to be in like every single list in some capacity. He's going to be there with the crown, probably on the horse, if not for nothing else than just being able, like a very strong command or compel caster, but also as like a secondary or tertiary hitter, just because with the crown and on the horse, he can still hit 4 attacks on the charge, which is great.
Yeah, I think he's an easy legend. I can see you maybe building Angmar without him in like a special kind of build, but you know, he's the foundation and you want him most of the time.
You're just too damn good.
He's kind of what all these other like jack of all trades heroes want to be, but don't quite hit.
Yeah. All right. And our next hero is the Dwimmerlaik. We have a video ranking all 9 named ringwraiths, and we do talk about him quite a bit in that one. So check it out if you haven't already. If you've seen that video, we generally were not a huge fan of him. He was amazing in the last edition of the game, and he took a massive nerf this edition. And I think I've only seen him in one list in one game out of like since 2018, since the start of this edition.
So I always mix these two wraiths up. Probably because we don't see him that much, but which one is he? Is he the one where you spend extra resources?
Yeah.
Okay, so on a 4+, he spends a will, and on a 4+, he makes you have to spend another point of might, will, or fate, right?
Yeah, and he's the one that has to go two-handed and has no might.
He's a decent caster though, and I think 16 will, I believe, so slightly higher than normal. Yeah.
Like 0-16-2, is that it?
Yeah, but he's essentially just a bad Grima, right? And like it's sad because the special rule is so fun. It's a rule that I would love to see more of, because those kind of rules challenge your opponents and adds more decision making. It's not just like my guy does this to you, so your guy just becomes worse. Kind of like a shade effect, but it's actually like a decision maker.
If it was, I don't know, if the roll was like a little bit better, because like a 4+ isn't that great. I don't know, if it was a little bit more improved, or if it was like you spend a will and it activates for the turn, it'd be a lot better.
Yeah, so how it used to be is you didn't have to spend a will at all. It was just passive ability at all times. So it was borderline broken. So if they kind of just like Ian said, stuck in the middle. You spend one will at the start of the turn. I think that would have made it like just balanced, but because they made it on every single use, you're just going to run out of will really quickly, or you're just not going to cast many spells. I think conceptually it's devastating if you combine it with the other spellcasters that Angmar has, we'll get into later. Like if you combine it with a Paralyze, or if you combine it with a Shade. If a hero had to use 2 might to might up their roll, you could kill heroes really, really easily. But just his price tag, like for what he does, he's way too expensive. Personally, I'm thinking a minor. Like I can see maybe a list working out if you're a really experienced player and you know the combo that you're trying to set up. I can see him being pretty effective, but you kind of have to know what you're doing when you're taking him.
Yeah, it's a bit sad though, because I feel like this profile fits in really well with all the other stuff in Angmar, and it works well, but yeah, it's just not very good right now.
This one was consistently either the worst or second worst Wraith on all our lists. So I don't know. I think if this isn't an independent, then I don't know what is. So I'll throw a vote that way. And plus the fact that like we said, we haven't even really seen it, right? So you got to be desperate to take him.
Sure, put him down there. Why not? I don't know. It's not gonna.
More controversy.
I don't know. I just think at high points, if you can combo him with like heavy spell casting, you could get his points back. It's got to be a very specific build.
But like. It's hard though even at high points, because you're probably going to go Witch King and then you grab him and then you grab Gulavhar. That's like over 500 points just on heroes. And I know like Angmar can afford to do that, but then they're missing out on like they're not going to take any Barrow Wights. They're probably not going to get a captain because you're just going to have to spend the rest of the points on troops.
Oh, yeah, I'm thinking more of like a list where he's the biggest guy. So like you take Dwimmerlaik and then you take like 2 Barrow Wights and then a Shade or something. And then you just go for the debuff stack.
But like if you think about it, he's worth like more than 2 Barrow Wights. So you're saying that it's making it harder to resist 1 Barrow Wight. But if you add 2 more Barrow Wights, that's you're probably going to get it through as well, right?
Yeah. Like 4 Barrow Wights throwing a 1 die paralyze every turn.
Next, we have the Tainted.
I think he's a solid option, nothing too crazy. I've seen him here and there, but you kind of have to build a particular list around it, like a very specialized list that utilizes his ability. So I would say Fortitude.
Yeah, I'm kind of leaning to Fortitude as well. I think like if you are gonna take a second Wraith in the list, you go for the Witch King and then you go for him. Yeah. And also it's kind of funny. I think he's maybe one of the only Wraiths that actually got a buff this edition from last edition in the way his special rule works, because you get to choose to trigger it rather than it always being up, right? That's pretty nice. But you got to be really careful, because if you activate that special rule and then you're broken, bye-bye orcs.
The reason I don't think we see him a lot is because there are so many better heroes in Angmar, as we'll talk about in a bit. Being a list that you don't necessarily need a lot of might, you can be in a situation where you don't care if your models don't benefit from heroic actions, and that's when he shines. It's a very situational special rule where you're going to have to know when to use it, and you're going to have to build around it a little bit. But yeah, I like him generally.
I mean, at least it fits the Angmar niche, because like they have terror everywhere, and that's why they don't need a lot of might. Like, imagine having that special rule as like a Rohan player or something. Just that would be absolutely useless.
Yeah. Okay, so next hero we have Gulavhar. Now, we talked about him a little bit in our collab video with the noobs in the monster tier list.
Okay, so yeah, I don't want to go into it too much because we've already ranked him in a tier list. But I will say, August 2023, there was a kind of a nerf to him. He was used as the example for flying monsters. You can't really hide behind the the regular Orc Warrior anymore. He can be shot at with no in the ways. So it's kind of significant considering like his biggest weakness is probably shooting. So does that bring him down a level? Before I would have argued maybe he's above the Witch King or maybe not, but now he's definitely below.
I think it's a justifiable nerf to flying monsters and flying creatures in general, but like he's still great. And I mean it does affect him a little bit more because he's one of the few ones that has like a lower defense. Like he's only defense 5. But like the hero assassinating power that he has is still insane. He's still a great model.
Is it more of a Gulavhar nerf or is it more of a cave troll buff?
Both.
Oh yeah, because cave trolls can still provide the in the way, right?
Yeah.
So personally, the FAQ is pretty recent. So on paper, I think that maybe it won't affect him that much. Like it's still a nerf. You're gonna have to be more careful with him, but with a 12-inch flying range, more likely than not, you'll be able to find terrain to hide behind, right? And still charge safely into combat.
It won't be as easy because like right now, like the turn before the lines clash, you can set Golfimbul like kind of in the middle of your forest or something behind a couple lines and feel fairly safe. And you're also in very prime position to be like, hey, next turn, I can hit anywhere on your line. So the only thing is like now you're weakened positionally that you're forced to like, let's say, maybe go off a little bit more to the side behind terrain, which isn't maybe the most optimal position. And like, it's more predictable where you can probably attack. So that's the kind of nerf that I'm seeing. But honestly, that's probably only going to matter at a very, very high level of play.
I think it is a bit of a nerf, but it's not going to make a huge effect on the way he gets played. Like he's still going to be amazing. He's still going to be able to do things. It just puts a little bit more of a skill cap on it than there was before, which this army kind of, it has a kind of high skill cap. But like we were saying before, like if you get better at playing the game, you can get better at playing this list and you can do a lot more stuff with it. So I don't have any problems with that jumping up a little bit more.
We did do a full episode on Gulavhar with Unexpected Podcast member Matt Iverson. So if you haven't listened to that one, please go check it out. Our next hero is Burdhur, the Hill Troll Chieftain.
Yeah, and we also tiered this guy in the same monsters tier list. I believe we put him in Valor, was it?
Or Fortitude.
That's where I was going to put him this time.
No change.
I mean,
he can block Golfimbul now.
Yeah, there you go. Burdhur buff. So this is kind of a controversial statement, but he's kind of this list's version of a Might Caddy. Like I think he's the cheapest 3 Might hero you can get in this list, right? Or he's one of the only like 2 or 3 Might heroes you can get in the list anyway, right?
I guess you can get like a cheap Witch King, but yeah.
But yeah, that's. And so yeah, he's got to place it, but again, there's different builds. I think he's more popular at smaller points because if you can't get Gulavhar and all the other stuff, but you still want something that can, chop heroes in combination with the Witch King, then he's kind of your man.
Yeah.
Correction, we actually ranked him the top of Fortitude.
Oh, he got that much better being able to block Gulavhar.
They can use us as cannon fodder.
One thing to note is that he's not a spirit. So he doesn't synergize with your army bonus. He doesn't provide your orcs with terror. And similar to the cave troll profile that we'll cover later, what he has doesn't really synergize with the tricks Angmar has. Even though he's a pretty decent profile, I think the reason you don't see him that much is because there are so many better profiles that do synergize with the army bonus and with the strategies common with Angmar.
We can just blame it on the noobs. They dragged him down.
I don't know. I'm actually thinking he might be in Fortitude now for me. Well, because of like the not providing the army bonus thing that Charles mentioned, but also you can get a Fell Beast on the Witch King. So if you want a secondary hitter that's like big, he kind of does it better than Burdhur. And also Burdhur doesn't have a two-handed weapon. A standard cave troll does have a two-handed weapon. So a standard cave troll hits like harder than him. I mean, yeah, he has the advantages of having the might and a will point to resist, but the actual raw damage isn't as good as a normal cave troll.
But I think anything under like 600 or under points wise, I think he's very, very strong. I think that's the balance, right? Like probably like above 600, he's not the most competitive option, and you're probably almost always going to go Golfimbul, like 700, 800, whatever. But under 600, like he's probably a better pick. I've seen Golfimbul at like 500, 500 and whatever. The Angmars usually don't do that well because the remaining army, when you take Golfimbul and probably the Witch-King, you don't have enough stuff.
I see your argument, and I do think he's a pretty decent profile. I think it just comes down to there are so many options in Angmar, and arguably like better options. And like what was brought up earlier, why not just take more Barrow Wights?
Well, you got to have a hitter. You can't just take only Barrow Wights.
No, I'd be happy with him in either one, I think, in Valor or Fortitude. He's like a high Fortitude or low Valor. It doesn't make a big difference to me.
Okay. We can leave him there for now. We upgraded him from the other tier list. Next, we have the Wild Orc Chieftain. Now, I think this one is, in my opinion, underrated profile. I know some people forget that he's in this army list, but he's a pretty solid profile. And I remember, Richard, you've brought him to a tournament a few years ago with him, right, at low points, and that was pretty good.
No, it wasn't. And that's why I think I'm going to rate him not so high. It was not a fun experience. This was before the AOL Legion, and I think he's good in that Legion. But in Angmar, the thing is the might. Like, you're limited with the use, and he only has 2 might. So that's pretty big for, like, being, like, 80 points. So he has 2 might. He can only heroic move with Wild Wargs. And that is a huge detriment unless you're playing pure Wild Wargs. I think his stats are nice, but when you take a deeper look into, like, the might usage, and he doesn't have cavalry charge or monstrous charge either. So the 3 attacks is always going to be 3 attacks.
Because he's around the same points as a cave troll, right? Like, what do you think of using him as like a dedicated troop killer?
Why not just take a cave troll?
He has
the raw stats. Yeah. I mean, the move is nice.
He's fast, yeah.
But I understand in Assault on Lothlorien, he's more effective because you have Bat Swarms, because you have Enraged Beast.
Yeah.
Like that combo with him.
I don't know, like the move 10 from the Warg compared to like Burdhur being able to move 6. Like, I think you'd still take Burdhur like almost every day of the week.
Yeah, because the fight 5 and no strike is not really going to assassinate anything of value, to be honest, unless you do a channel transfix, which hard to pull off these days.
Or a paralyzed, but
then you're talking about 3 pieces, right? You're talking about compelling out, paralyzing, and then running your Wild Warg Chief out to get that kill.
There's other things that'll do it better, I think. I think I'm going to put him in minor and just leave him there.
I was thinking Fortitude, but I can see the argument for minor. He is strength 6, right? So he does hit pretty hard if you want to have him munching on troops. But Richard probably has more experience with Angmar, so if he
I mean, I do like the profile and the stats and stuff. It's not a bad pick. Like, I don't think he's like ruin your list or anything. I just don't think it's a super strong one. I could go with like a low Fortitude ranking, to be honest.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've already mentioned this next hero several times. It is the Barrow Wight. He's all right. He's not great.
Yeah. It's only like the best spell in the game. It's fine. It's fine.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of get why they haven't nerfed it, because like it's the reason why Angmar is competitive, but I don't know. I feel like people have stopped complaining about it 3-4 months into the new edition. The first little bit was definitely like, oh wow, Angmar is broken, but that's kind of tapered off. But this essentially is like the essence and the soul of the Angmar list. Like, I think if you're playing Angmar to kind of get access to this this spell because no one else has it.
Whenever I see an Angmar list without a Barrow Wight, I usually feel the need to bring it up. I know when Matt Iverson came on our episode, I believe he brought a pure Angmar list without a Barrow Wight, and I was just like shocked. And I think Ian once wrote an Angmar list without a Barrow Wight too. The Paralyze spell is so good with 12 slots to lead warriors for 50 points. Is also just super efficient when you're trying to hoard out in Angmar lists. Like, we often complain about how like minor spellcasters like this in other armies only have 6 slots, like Stormcallers and Shamans, and that brings them down a bit. Like, he has those 12 slots, and there's no detriment to your army. So you can take multiple of these guys and not suffer in your list building.
The thing about the slots is actually a really good point. Like, if he could only lead 6, I think it'd be a lot more interesting. But like right now it's no competition, right? Like, between him and the next 2 heroes, the Captain and the Shaman, like you always just go for an extra Barrow Wight. Unless you really, really want the Marsh. That's the only reason. He can still lead 12, so he's got like so much over the Shaman. He's the same cost as the Captain, basically. The Captain can be a little cheaper depending on the Warg gear.
It's D7, 2 wounds.
Yeah, and he can leave 12. He activates the army bonus because he's a spirit hero, which is big. And then you get to the spell itself, which is fantastic for shutting down enemy heroes. Setting up what Angmar does best, which is assassinating heroes. Like, I mean, sometimes you get those assassinations going off when, like, with a Witch-King doing a Compel or an Immobilize, but usually you hit him with Paralyze, and then Burdhur or Gulavhar jumps in and just one-shots the hero. Yeah, they're just automatically on the ground, and they can't do anything. They can't even try to win the fight and force extra, like, resources or might out of whoever they're fighting.
Kick him in when he's down.
Yeah, it's gross.
So I think easy legend here. I would probably even put him above Golfimbul just because, like, you take him in low and high points. He's just everywhere.
50 points! It's insane!
Even before you get up close, psychologically it messes up your opponent already. Because they're only 50 points, most likely you can have more than one. So when your standard big hero only has 3 will, all of a sudden you're super, like, conservative charging into combat because you're like, okay, well, I might be able to resist the first Paralyze, but he's got a second Barrow Wight. Like, my hero might not do anything this game.
Yeah, the one part that they were actually thinking about when they wrote that rule is only giving it like a 6-inch range, but still, it's nasty.
I'm okay with that ranking. Okay, next hero we have is the Orc Captain. So, Orc Captains, you can find them in many armies, many legendary legions. Their role in Angmar is that they're the only profile with Heroic March. So, wait, the Wild Warg Chieftain doesn't have March. Yeah. He does, but it only affects Wild Wargs. So, yeah, essentially, unless you're running an all Wild Warg army, this is the only profile with Heroic March. Angmar, as we discussed, with their weakness being a glass cannon army, they're prone to shooting. That's one thing that you can take to mitigate their weakness. So that's why people take this profile. That's why you see it. But like we said throughout this video so far, Angmar has many hero options. So it depends what kind of Angmar list you want to build, whether you want to make movement and mobility one of the tools you have in your army or not.
I would also say it depends on what Warg gear you give him too, because he also can be like a pseudo hitter, right? If he's on the Warg, he can take a pick. And if he's hitting a paralyzed hero, he can, have 6 strength 5 attacks going into them on a turn. So it's enough to kill minor heroes or small, like 2 wound heroes easily and one shot them. So he's got a bit of versatility that way. He's an Orc Captain. I think he probably just goes in Fortitude somewhere.
Yeah, I like the versatility of him. We just talked about how good the Barrow Wight is, but I know at higher points, it's like, do you want your 4th Barrow Wight or do you want one Orc Captain? I'm usually the type, I guess, to lean towards a more well-rounded option and go with the Orc Captain there. So, with the law of diminishing returns, I prefer after the 3rd Barrow Wight, probably go with the Orc Captain. So he definitely still has some use there.
And just a way to get extra might into the list without, I think everything else that brings might in this list costs at least double his points cost, right? So
Ian mentioned earlier that you can put him on a warg and use him as a hitter, but I've also seen people just take him without any gear to, make him like the cheapest might battery as possible. And if you look at the rest of the Angmar list, most of your might is on pretty big like centerpieces. And so if you want like just a small hero to do their heroic moves and save the might on those big heroes, this is one of the only ways you can do it. I actually would put him in Valor. I know we're kind of maybe going with Fortitude on this one, but I think he's a Valor because I see him arguably more often than Burdhur. So I think there's multiple reasons to take him, and you see him quite a bit. So yeah, what do you guys think?
It is true. I probably do take him more than Burdhur.
Yeah, I think you convinced me, Charles. Actually, like he kind of earns the spot up in Valor. Simply like, how often do you see Orc Captains getting taken in most other lists? Not that often. Here he does show up pretty regularly. So yeah, it's fair enough. Is he in front of Burdhur though?
I would say so. The Orc Captain brings more utility that Angmar needs. Because like Burdhur brings hitting power and a heroic strike. That is in itself is not as helpful as a model with heroic march, a model with really cheap points of might.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. They're different kinds of models, right? It's like one's a hitter and one's utility, but I see that argument. And I personally, I guess, have seen and have played the Orc Captain in Angmar a lot more, so I'm okay with this.
Next, we have the Orc Shaman. So this model was featured on our Worst Heroes bracket, and he made it on our top 16 Worst Heroes. So, knowing that we're not huge fans of this guy, I think we can start by kind of referencing our analysis on the Barrow Wight. The Angmar Orc Shaman is also 50 points. So that right there is, I think, the main reason.
Yeah, so he's got Wither and Immobilize, right?
No, Wither and Instill Fear.
Wither and Instill, right. I always think, he's so different from all the other ones. I don't know. Like, I like the profile that they made a Shaman that doesn't have Fury. And I like that it still means that Angmar has a weakness to Fury, so it's like it does have very obvious weaknesses.
The Angmar Orc Shaman was your pick from the bracket video.
Yeah, I know, but like I like the idea of a Shaman with Wither. Like I like conceptually. It doesn't work that well in this list. And I don't know how much of that is a function of him being not great or compared to the Barrow Wight being so much better for the same points cost.
I guess he has a might point where the Barrow Wight has none, but 90% of the situations, would you rather have Wither or would you rather have another Paralyze?
Oh, well, that's the problem, is you'd always rather have the Paralyze, even if he does come with a... Oh. And I think does he only lead 6 models, right? Not 12? Yeah, the Barrow Wight just has so much going for it. In addition to this,
I think you can mount him though.
Oh, yeehaw! Yeah, he probably goes independent, but I don't think it's his fault. He just needs some love, and the Barrow Wight needs to get a little worse.
I think if the Barrow Wight didn't exist, you would see this guy in a competitive list. You would use him to combo with the other spells from the Ring Wraiths.
Definitely. Because he does combo well against threats against Gulavhar, right? Because Gulavar's low defense, but if the enemy hero's strength goes down by a bunch, then Gulavhar doesn't care as much if he starts losing fights. So like there is a little bit of synergy there.
That's true. Though he has 3 will and a cast on a 3.
Yeah, the casting. Yeah, if the cast was on like a 2, maybe.
And for most heroes, you have to at least successfully hit it twice. Because that strength 4, like strength 3 is the same wound value, right?
Like there is definitely a build there where this actually works really well combined with the Witch-King. The problem is the Barrow Wight just does the same kind of thing, but better.
Yeah.
It sounds like a pretty similar analysis of our of Dwimmerlaik that we did.
Yeah.
Now, do we put him ahead or behind the Dwimmerlaik?
Was the Dwimmerlaik in our worst heroes?
Knight of Angmar was. I would put him behind because at least the Dwimmerlaik you have like a strategy around it, and I guess you would you could argue that you could surprise someone who doesn't know his rules very well. The Orc Shaman, there's simply a better point-for-point hero available in the list.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not. He doesn't really have any saving graces besides a spell that nobody else really has.
And in our final Angmar hero, we have the Shade. This is a model that's known to be, for a while, nerfed every single FAQ. It's been nerfed, I think, 3 or 4 times at this point. It's the model that a lot of people say they hate playing with the most, and I can see why.
Much cursed, much nerfed. I think it's probably right where it should be. Yeah, like you can still make a build around this model and it can still be really good, but there's only one specific build, and it's not like last edition where you're going to see it getting allied into every single freaking evil army with 2 fell beasts, and then you cry yourself to sleep after that game. It's not like that anymore. It's still frustrating to play against, but it's balanced. I really like where it's sitting right now in terms of balance.
Perfectly balanced, as all things should be.
Yeah, I don't think anyone likes playing against the Shade. So I think no one was sad or that sad that it got nerfed. So
Yeah.
I definitely still think it's playable, like Ian said. But I think the combo of people knowing it's not fun to play against and it's not like super broken, it doesn't give a lot of reasoning to play it unless you just really, really like that play style. But I think it would probably sit pretty firmly in Fortitude for me.
Yeah. I mean, with the nerfs, you're forced to play it in Angmar only now. And then also, even in Angmar, you have restrictions now, right? So, like, trolls and wargs in this list, I think, also suffer the -1.
I think just the cave troll, because Burdhur, I think, still has the Angmar keyword.
Okay. So it's just cave troll and the 2 orc profiles.
Yeah, I'd put him like top of Fortitude, I think, because I feel like you see him still more than like the double Wraith builds.
Yeah, I think top of Fortitude or bottom of Valor, because he is still one of the main like 3 centerpieces, right? Because most Angmar armies you will see either Witch-King, Gulavhar, Shade, or multiples of those 3. So I think you could still play a really effective list around this profile, and he's still one of the main like strategies, main win conditions of Angmar. So yeah, either high Fortitude or low Valor for me. Okay, let's move on to the warriors. So the first warrior we have is the Cave Troll. Now this is a profile that we also see in Moria. However, in Angmar, I believe it's quite a bit different. So as we just discussed with the Shade, he doesn't synergize well with the Shade, so generally you won't see them in the same army, but he does provide a little bit of hitting power when most of your army is typically orcs, strength 3 orcs. But what do you guys think about him, especially with the recent FAQ change on targeting flying monsters?
I don't think it has any effect on whether you take a cave troll or not. Unless you're playing on like in a tournament that every board only has like 2 pieces of terrain on it. I think he's just outshadowed by like everything else, because anything in this list you're going to spend that many points on, you're probably going to want to get a hero set with like heroic stats or some other shenanigans. Dropping 80 points on like a troop in this list doesn't feel great.
I think in comparison with Moria, the Cave Troll's much better in Moria. In Angmar, I feel like shooting is a bigger weakness. So when you think about how a troll is equal to what, like 12 orcs, 13 orcs, it hurts your numbers a lot. So I think most of the time I would take the 12 orcs instead of the trolls. So I'm trying to think of a situation where you would benefit from taking a cave troll. I mean, maybe at high points, and you want to have multiple threats. If you don't want Gulavhar to be like your only hitter, you want like a cave troll on the flanks to hit troops and stuff like that can be useful. I don't think he's useless, but I just think that he gets in the way of you trying to hoard out your numbers a lot of the time.
He's always going to be a solid profile. We've talked about him in the past before. He's probably one of the only non-hero monsters that are playable. But yeah, like you guys said, his role doesn't synergize really well with the army list. There's better assassins, there's better hitters, and then he doesn't really do much in the support role because he's not a spirit, so he's fine, but definitely not a must take.
If he worked with the shade well, I think there'd be a really interesting build there, but all the things we can wish for. I mean, I think the nerf to the shade was fine, but I think the Cave Troll should just get the Angmar keyword in the list, right?
Yeah.
Like everything in the list should just get that, because then, an all monster list, but you're fighting against that, and most of your guys get -1s. That means, even though they're not named, it's interesting. I don't know, but yeah, he's probably somewhere around where the Wild Orc Chieftain is. Like, you see him, but not a lot. That's kind of what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I'm cool with that. Okay, next we have the Angmar Orc Warrior. So this was the warrior we were talking about when we were discussing the army bonus. So basically, when they're within 3 inches of a spirit hero in this army, they gain the terror rule. So since this is usually the backbone of your army, you have dozens of them, potentially could mean most of your army having terror. And with your army usually having Harbinger, that can be very deadly.
Yeah, I mean, orcs are already like a solid profile in the other armies that they're in. And in this one, they're particularly good. They're actual legends here.
Well, yeah, if you do the troop-centric build where you just have a shade and some other spirit heroes and then just a massive orcs, they actually do become quite scary.
But even in the more hero-focused ones, like you still have to take like a decent amount of orc warriors, I think.
Absolutely. The cheapness of the profile and just the fact that they can still hit defense 5, which is and be fight 3 it's the perfect profile for this list to allow you to get all the fun stuff that you want to take to do all those combos.
I would say that the average army, people try to spend only up to half their points on heroes. In Angmar, I feel like you can cheat out of that a little bit and go above the half, and it's because of this profile. You're like, okay, it's an 800 point list. I'm going to spend 500 on heroes or 550 because I know I can still hit the numbers. They're great. I don't know if I would put them on top of Legend. I guess in terms of popularity, when have you seen an Angmar without this profile? So in that case, it would be at the top of Legend. But how often would you say like they're the MVP and they win the game for you? I think still Legend, but maybe not the top. Yeah, maybe at the bottom of Legend, because I still think they're amazing and easily the best troop in this army.
Well, yeah, they're not the best by any means. It's still just like a humble orc warrior, but just like we said, the points cost and the combination works well with like list building for this. So by virtue of that, and then the army bonus, and then the other bonuses available, I think they do just pip into Legend.
Yeah, I wouldn't say they're a perfect profile. Like their shooting is pretty worthless. This edition, they lost the access to orc trackers, and now most Angmar players I see, they just don't even bother with bows. And without Fury in the list, their courage is still pretty bad. So they have their weaknesses, but when they're so cheap, you don't really care. The next profile we have is the Angmar Warg Rider. So this is like the same as the standard Warg Rider profile, except with the Angmar keyword. So it's basically just an Orc Warrior on a Wild Warg. We talked about mobility a little bit earlier. What do you guys think about taking Warg Riders instead of like Heroic March in Angmar lists?
I think you might take both, honestly, but like not mass. Like you probably only grab 2 or 3 just to have a little bit of extra mobility, but also to be able to cancel enemy hero like cavalry bonuses, or to like nerf enemy heroes or enemy cavalry that are charging around. But I think you're still going to see them fairly frequently in most builds. It's the same thing as the regular Orc Warriors, right? They're what, 12 points with a shield, 11 points base. Like they're still very efficient just to get a cav in the list.
Yeah, I would say, though, they're probably a little less valuable than the Orc Warrior just because if you're going just for speed, the next option we're going to talk about, there's a more budget option and you can still get the 10-inch moves. So it's not as much of a must-take. But then, of course, there's stuff that you can do with the Warg Rider that you can't do with the Wild Warg, like the dismounting and the charging other enemy cavalry to mitigate their attack bonuses. So I don't know, maybe I would say like a Fortitude, Valor in between there.
I like the Warg Rider profile in other lists better. I prefer them in in Mordor and Isengard. In Angmar, I would rather take the Orc Captain, and like Richard mentioned, the budget option Wild Warg. I'd rather take a few of those. I don't know. I just think that Warg Riders kind of cut down on your numbers a little bit too. Like, I don't think your list is necessarily inefficient if you take them, but I would rather take Wild Wargs for mobility.
Yeah, I'm fine with them being in fortitude. Yeah.
Okay.
Not
Split the
amazing, but
difference.
they're good. Good enough.
Okay, we have the Wild Warg next. So we kind of just started talking about them. They are the cheap option for mobility in this list. Their cost is just slightly over the cost of an orc, and they provide the 10-inch movement. Not very impressive in combat. They're still fight 3 and still defense 4, but they do allow you to send models off to objectives and make traps for a pretty cheap cost.
Oh yeah, I love these guys, and I think they're a better deal than their cousins, the Fell Wargs too. Whenever you can get like a 10-inch model for like cheap, like under 10 points, it doesn't even really matter what their stats are. Like I played the Spider Queen a lot, and those broodlings, like they have the worst stats ever, but whenever you position them right, you're just throwing them around, they can do a lot of crazy stuff, and same thing as these guys. So they're just so cheap. Like they're a little bit more than an Orc Warrior, and then you get this super fast moving unit. It has to be ranked pretty high here for me.
Yeah, the only thing that puts them down compared to an Orc is their 40 millimeter base. You're never going to use Wild Wargs as like your main battle line. They can't be supported by spears, and they can get surrounded pretty easily. They're not great in actual fight, so you're not going to want to spam them out, even though they are cheap. Yeah. But I think they're solid Valor.
Okay, yeah, fine. We can put them in Valor. I mean, like, I know it's useful to have the 10-inch movement models, but I just feel like the Wargs by themselves, like, all they do is just die. We said this list is vulnerable to shooting. These guys are defense 4. Like, any bow wounds them on a 5 or better, right? And then their giant base size means once they get into combat, they're going to get swamped and killed super quickly. I don't know. They're fine. I don't think they're amazing, but I will bow to being outvoted on this one a little bit.
I will agree that in the past I've used them in the wrong way, and that's how I've learned it, where I've just thrown them into combat. They're definitely not good in fighting, and you're right. Like, when your army is so prone to shooting, you're not going to want to take too many of them. But in scenario pools that are not kill the enemy, I think they're going to be useful almost every game.
Absolutely. That is true. I don't know. Maybe I just like the Warg Riders a bit better, but yeah, the mobility is still good. You're still definitely going to take at least a couple of them or a couple of the Warg Riders in every list you build, pretty much.
Final warrior profile we have is the dead Marsh Spectre.
Or what the Sentinel should be.
Your high courage troops in the list. Yay!
Yeah, these guys are very, very crazy value, because if you don't have like your whole army as fearless, even if you have like courage 4, like your guys are going to be eventually just line scattered, random guys running all over the place. If your guy has an objective, like, you can't trust that. Just the amount of like movement shenanigans that you can do, like, is insane.
But yeah, I mean, typical build is what, between 2 and 6 of these guys, probably, just because they do end up eating into your points when you're already spending tons of points on heroes. But they got a lot going for them. They got the pullout is great. Their high courage is nice. I think they even have Blades of the Dead, so they can actually wound things, somewhat reasonably, because you're going to have a -1 courage bubble pretty much wherever you are fighting on the board with these guys. They're great, but unless you're doing like a niche build like Richard was talking about, you're probably not taking a lot of them, but you're definitely going to want to have at least a few in there in whatever list you're going to be building.
Yeah, even with lists that have Fearless, generally the Fearless is provided by a single hero or some kind of shaman. Angmar has the power to just delete like a hero from the board, and when they do that, then the Spectres go to work. For those that watched our Lothlorien tier list, basically all the negatives we said about the Sentinel, the Spectre doesn't have those. So he doesn't have the 2 attack that you're paying for, and he doesn't have the Elven Cloak that you're paying for. So you can have so many more of them.
It's almost the same, but way better.
He's also D4, which isn't great,
D5.
but it's... Is he D5?
Yeah.
Oh my god, that's a huge jump above D3.
Cue the meme, the guy that she tells you not to worry about with the Sentinel.
Fuck, man.
They got that Lake Town armor.
Yeah, no
Yeah.
shit, eh? Wait.
Warriors of
Wait.
Numenor.
This-
Warriors
yeah,
of
I know.
Numenor wear armor, but after they become undead, it becomes heavy armor.
No. That's why Numenor doesn't have any heavy armor. It's because everybody who wore it was at this one battle specifically. They took all the good stuff, and then they all drowned.
That doesn't make sense, but okay.
What the
I'm thinking
So
this
stupid.
profile's got to be at least Valor.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah, it's
Probably top of Valor.
in Legend, honestly. Like, I think it's another staple of Angmar at this point.
The only reason I hesitate to put in Legend is, there is a situation I brought up where, like, the whole army could be Fearless, and if you can't take out that target that provides a Fearless, they could have limited use. The other thing is, it could be an army without very many good targets. If they don't have, like, a banner or, like, a monster that you can fell light away, then they might not do very much, especially if you only take 1 or 2 of them. Like, if you're playing against, like, Goblin Town and you only have 3 Spectres, like, they can move a couple goblins away, but it's probably inconsequential.
Because even if we're talking about Courage 5 lists, like with elves and stuff, the fact that you have Harbinger of Evil, like the regular elves are solid targets now. So I would kind of be okay with this too.
Yeah, because the way how Felllight works is you can't resist it because it's not a spell, right? And with an army that also has access to Drain Courage, you could really bully heroes into not doing anything.
Yeah.
Because most of the heroes, if they don't have Fortify Spirit, they're going to be really hesitant to use Will to resist a Drain Courage when there's huge hitting spells like Paralyze in this list.
Yeah. Yeah, it can also get to the point where if you get enough of those Drain Courages off, you don't even need to paralyze the hero because they're not going to be able to charge anything in your army anyway. That's... Or they're just going to spend the entire game wandering off because of the Spectres.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty brutal.
I think they deserve Legend. So there's actually one profile that we almost missed, and the end of Scarring the Shire. It is Golfimbul Orc Chieftain.
Hands down, the best hero you can get for this army at like 150 points, I think.
At 150 points, that's the important part.
If you play in like Minimize or something that the Aussies do, this guy probably rocks it. Spam those orcs out.
Yeah. So his rules are a bit strange because he is like a narratively driven profile, right? Written to fight hobbits, basically. He's like basically an orc captain, but you get the strike instead of the march. He's only fight 3 though, and instead of the fate point that the orc captain has, he has a 5+ save.
So yeah, the 5+ save is a passive, right? So there's no way to get rid of that, right? Besides like Flowy.
Yeah. I mean, if he keeps making those saves, he'll keep living, I guess.
He's like potentially more durable than an orc captain, I guess, if you save his might to boost up those rolls, but also he's capped at D5, so not really.
At first I would say take him for the heroic strike, but at fight 3 heroic strike, it's not good. It's not consistent.
No. I mean, okay. I mean, so it is Angmar, and obviously anything hitting a paralyzed model is good. But this guy mounted, if he goes 2-handed with his hand and a half mace against somebody who's on the floor, he'll put out some damage. But, he costs 50 points, and I think every time you're going to take a Barrow Wight instead.
Yeah, and what we said about the Orc Shaman, who is also 50 points, I'm starting to think the Orc Shaman gets a friend in independent tier. Because comparing him to the Barrow Wight again, or in this case the Orc Captain, you're gonna take the Orc Captain every time, I think.
Well, I mean, no, because Barrow Wights can lead 12. Damn it, they're so good.
It's not so much that he is like an unusable profile, but it's just that the Orc Captain and the Barrow Wight are in the list, and they're just better.
Yeah. Yeah, the Orc Captains fight 4 base, which is just flat out better, and it can piercing strike to strike 5, which, you know, it's not as good as a hand and a half weapon, but it's like it's good enough.
Yeah.
To crack E7.
Yeah.
You know, if he had heroic defense, he'd actually be a pretty neat profile.
Yeah.
The way it is now, I mean, he's got heroic challenge. That's cool if you want to give your opponent a point on might or 2.
Or if he had 3 might, he'd be a good might battery option in Angmar.
Yeah, but then like risky because he's still 2 wounds, 0 fate.
Yeah.
Yeah, just at that price point. I mean, how much is it an Orc Captain mounted with a shield? Is 55?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
which if you didn't take the shield, it would be the same cost, except the Orc Captain would have 1 fate.
I think he's pointed to be able to compete with an Orc Captain, but it's just missing a little bit. It's just not quite there.
Yeah, it doesn't synergize with Angmar.
No, no. I mean, maybe if you're doing like the Beasties list, like that version where you're running like the Warg Chieftain around, then he kind of makes sense. But that's like more of a themed list, and then you're bringing him so you have a cheap strike to have one. But yeah, he's not doing a lot.
So looking at the tier list right now, I'm actually thinking that Dwimmerlaik should go into minor, because I was thinking the other day, like, if you were to build an unnamed Ringwraith with 16 will, let's say he could go up to 16 will, that's about 110 points. So Dwimmerlaik, even if he never used a special rule, he's only about 10 points over costed. Like, even if you valued his special rule at 0 points. So I'm like, I just don't think he's as bad as these two.
His casting values are the same as the normal Wraith?
Yeah, except his black dart is 12 inches. There are some wraiths that randomly have a 6-inch black dart.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with something being in like the C tier. I don't think it makes a huge difference overall.
Just these two, I think, are at the bottom because there's no reason for you to see them, while C is like inefficient, but you can build something around them, sort of tier.
Yeah, I'm fine with him going up there. You think Golfimbul is above the Shaman? I mean,
What
it
do you
doesn't make a
think?
difference. It doesn't really make a difference. I don't know. They're both kind of a meme.
Yeah.
I feel like
I mean,
the Shaman with Wither, though, kind of synergizes at higher points if you get other spells in there, because the Wither can be really effective, but when you're like threatening the Paralyze, your opponent's more likely just to let it go through and let it happen. So it kind of synergizes better with the list. Whereas Golfimbul just exists.
I can see that. Golfimbul, while it's just like, I can't really see what he would bring to the list.
You're probably laughing pretty hard if Golfimbul like charges into a small hero like Madro. Like, he could easily just like bonk in one turn, and nobody's gonna see that one coming. But like, yeah, he's still pretty bad.
Yeah. Okay. Golfimbul comes in last on the tier list.
It would be a shame that if we had forgotten him, that would have added a lot to this discussion.
All right, so this has been our tier list of Angmar. Thank you all for watching. Look forward to the next episode of Into the West.